Welcome to Living in Chicago, the podcast where I get to interview real Chicagoans about the neighborhoods that they live, work, and play in. My name is Jake Lyons. I am your host, and in this episode, I interview Ayo Akinokun, who is a tech consultant and actor, singer, dancer, artist living in the Uptown neighborhood of Chicago, but he has bounced around all over the world. We get into a pretty interesting conversation about all the different places that he's lived and how Chicago compares to places ranging from Houston to Dubai, Paris, Lagos. I mean, it's it's a really interesting, very wide-ranging conversation that I think you guys will really enjoy and get a lot out of. If you are unfamiliar with the Uptown neighborhood, it is a neighborhood of Chicago on the north side between the Edgewater neighborhood and Lakeview, along the east side over by the borders right on the lake. There's a lot of it's a very, very eclectic area. There's lots of interesting restaurants and some concert venues. The Green Mill, the famous Green Mill is there. There's a lot of different things that you can get into, but, I'm not gonna step on the toes of the conversation too much. I'm just gonna go ahead and introduce you to Io and let him tell you all about the Uptown neighborhood of Chicago. Pleased to be joined here today by Ayo Akinokun. He is a tech consultant by day and actor, singer, artist by night and or maybe some just other days that he's not doing his tech consulting. He is originally from Nigeria, but he's a current resident of the Uptown neighborhood of Chicago, and he's bounced around a couple other neighborhoods as well, and a lot of places before landing here. So excited to get into this conversation and learn about what his experience of Chicago has been like, and among other things. Io, hey, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on. Was there anything in that intro that I botched or that you would like to add before we get into anything else?
No, no, not at all. My full first name is Ayo, but everyone calls me Ayo. That's including like
Hmm,
family stuff. So all good. You did.
gotcha. All right, right on. Yeah, so you're in the Uptown neighborhood. What has been just to keep it just within your time frame in Chicago for now, what has been the journey from the time that you got to Chicago to where you are now in Uptown?
Yeah. So I actually remember my first night in Chicago. The company that brought me to Chicago is not the company that I'm with now. And the company that first brought me to Chicago is very generous with their relocation package. So they gave me like money for a house hunting trip. They assigned me a realtor. They gave me like money for a hotel to stay at, all that kind of stuff. And so I drove to Chicago those few days, and I stayed at I believe it's the Swiss Hotel, like right off
Nice.
Wacker and Lakeshore. And then I went and looked in different neighborhoods. I remember I ended up at Logan Square. And at the time, my rationale for picking Logan Square is that I had fallen in love with the idea of living in places that weren't too far from downtown, but were their own separate world and a little bit more calm without being completely dead either, right? And so at the time, like Logan Square very much fit that. And I lived there for a year. And the reason I moved out was not because of Logan Square, but it was more so because of my building. Like I just felt like for what I was paying, I could be enjoying like nicer. And so I did that. I moved to the Uptown area. I moved uptown and I lived on Broadway. And then after a year there, the rent increased. And I was like, screw this, like I'm gonna find better rent, and blah blah blah. And then I look around and I find out that the new rent that they were asking for was the new normal, like around Chicago.
Hmm.
So then my
Yep.
new task became not to like find lower rent, but to find a place where I would feel like I was getting my money's worth paying that amount. And so I moved to
Hmm.
this lovely like corner unit with windows across the whole layout, and it's just very nice and very. It feels like it's worth what I'm paying. So that's been my journey, and I like Uptown a lot because it's like similar deal to what I was talking about before. It's not dead, but it's not like crazy either. Then it feels like culturally rich. You have a lot of Africans, a lot of Asians, East Asians, I'd say. Some South Asians too. It's very convenient. Like all the things that I would normally need, I can find, right? Like the other day, I had to go to physical therapy, and there was one like a 5 minute drive away. There's Mariano's, there's Whole Foods, there's every kind of grocery store. There's like multiple Jewel Oscars. My barber is 5 minutes away. My doctor is 5 minutes away. Physical therapy is 5 minutes away. The CVS is 2 minutes away. So like it's just everything is within reach still. And I still feel
Yep.
like Chicago, I don't feel like I'm a cast out. Like the layout is still very much Chicago. I'm 2 streets down from the lake. I get to find nice units that are moderately expensive, but not as crazy as like West Loop and South Loops and the River Norths. So
Hmm.
it's a lot of converging some really good qualities.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm just for my role as a real estate agent, I've definitely noticed that over the years where Uptown seems to be just good bang for the buck in terms of like north side
Mhm.
neighborhoods that are bordering the lake. Because if you want to be on the lake, you're talking Lakeview, Lincoln Park, Old Town, like Gold Coast. Like these are pricey places. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like but then yeah, you get up just a little bit more north into Uptown and it seems like you get a lot of the same kind of amenities and things, but for some reason it just doesn't quite have the same reputation, the same cachet. There's just something about it. I don't know, for whatever reason, the prices there are just a little lower. So if you're willing to be just like another like half mile north of downtown, you can definitely find some pretty good deals in Uptown, has been my experience of it.
Hey, look, I'm happy that people stay out. I'm happy
Right.
if they continue to look down on it and whatever. I know somebody like had asked me like, "Oh, you live uptown? Why?" And my Nigerian sarcasm jumped out, and I was just like, "Well, were you did you have rent to pay for me somewhere else? Like, why
Hmm.
would you ask me that?" But that is the thing is like there is a sense in Chicago that people like to be like attached to certain neighborhoods. And I'm more just like I like very nice things, but I'm also pretty pragmatic. And so usually there's a Beyonce lyric that I always reference because it goes meet and you can be both meet in the middle dance all night. So my pragmatism and my affinity for nice things are constantly meeting in the middle and dancing all night. And then having
Hmm.
trade off, not trade off, just like meet that middle. And that's how I end
Yeah.
up, apartments like this one. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So how long have you been in Uptown?
I've been in Uptown almost 2 years.
Okay. Yeah. Solid sample size. So what have you mentioned the broad strokes of some of the local businesses that have been good to you so far, but yeah, just to expand on that maybe a little bit more, like what are some of the, I don't know, local shops, restaurants, anything else like that that you'd want to, yeah, shout out or just mention as good places to go?
Yeah, so in this area, they have like good night, like decent Nigerian restaurants. There's one called
Mhm.
Iyance, for example, that I've like frequented a lot. I'm now slowly getting addicted to Stan's Donuts right down the way. I also really like, I forget the name of the theater, but there's a theater right on Broadway that I've been meaning to check out. And then what I really like about Uptown is there's a bunch of like very low stakes spots that you can just run up into, like kind of like bar type places where you get a little bit of food, a little bit of drinks, just very low stakes. You can just get out there. There's Fat Cat right there. That's a really good example of those kinds of bars. And then I kept going back to grocery stores because ever since I moved to Chicago, because of the layout of Chicago compared to places like Texas, I no longer want anything to do with grocery shopping for myself. And
Mhm.
so I'm always on Instacart, always. And through Instacart, I've become a big fan of the Jewel Osco. There's like two in this area. And then there's a Mariano's. I think there's also a Whole Foods, like down in the opposite direction. And then I've actually also had a lot of fun, like just socializing in other ways, doing like going to like little speakeasies here and there and improv and whatever. And I can't remember the names of those places at the moment. And I know my friends and I like to go to Boys Town once in a while. So like, and that's right there without feeling like I'm like in the middle of it, but I'm far enough where I can just like hop in very quickly and easily.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've been enjoying all of those things.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
What was the name again of the Nigerian restaurant you mentioned?
It's called Iyanze, Iyanze. Iyanze.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Where is that? I actually did a search for, a Nigerian restaurant. I don't remember seeing that one. I remember seeing a couple up in, like, the West Ridge neighborhood.
Mm. Yeah, this one's on Broadway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice, yeah. Is that along with? Because yeah, you mentioned the African community there, like, I've definitely it's hard not to notice, like, all the kinda like the African braiding salons and things like
Yeah.
that are up and down Broadway, so is it kinda, like, tucked in there somewhere?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's closer to like Broadway and Wilson. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the
Yeah.
block that it's around. Yeah.
I don't know how much insight you exactly have into this. If this ends up being dumb, I can just take this out. But I'm always interested to know like how specific cultures just like pick seemingly random places
Yeah.
to be together. What do you what do you think it is about Uptown that has gathered all kinds of people?
Yeah.
Um,
So I think before honing in on Uptown, I will say in general, as somebody who is not American and who has lived in different countries, there's like an automatic need that people have when they're in a country that's not theirs to find that community one way or the other, and to have that familiarity, the food and the culture and the music and the humor, the sense of humor, and like the even churches, stuff like that. So there's always like it always happens where whatever culture it is will find a way to coagulate and like
Yeah.
make their presence known in a way. And then in terms of picking the place, I'm actually very curious about that too, right? Because in America as a whole, Nigerians always, it's an inside joke with Nigerians now. Nigerians love Houston. Like if you go to Houston, there are Nigerians everywhere. It's enough to where like because my family friend's dad is a pastor aside from his other work, and he has a really big church. There are enough Nigerians that there are multiple big churches that are all
Hmm.
Nigerian. And it's just so interesting to me. I think maybe people just pick places that feel like similar in terms of layout and climate, which is probably not the case for Chicago, the climate wise. But I would think
Hmm.
there's this thing where like it just feels as if neighborhoods that are not quite like the center of the downtown, but are away. Like I've noticed moving from country to country, those neighborhoods, which is what Uptown is, for some reason, the minority cultures like seem to go to those places. It seems to
Yep.
feel like a place that is not yet overwhelmed with the culture of the center of the city, to where
Mm.
there's enough of a blank canvas for other
Mm.
cultures to like do their own thing and make their own businesses and like, and then it's probably word of mouth, right? Because if you yourself are Vietnamese and you have a Vietnamese friend who lives in Chicago, they're like, oh, I live uptown, there are a lot of Vietnamese restaurants, you will move there, and then your friend will move there, and then before you know it, people will start to be like, oh, there's a lot of Vietnamese people uptown, so that other Vietnamese people will move there too. So it's like a snake eating its own tail kind of thing. Yeah, that's my perspective at least.
Yeah. 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 For sure. Shout out to Asia and Argyle. That's an awesome area
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
I figured that's the answer, but I don't know. I just wanted to explore that a little bit. And it seems like you've had quite a journey to get here. In your fun facts, it says you and your family five countries and a minimum of 20 plus houses. That sounds is like just crazy. So what has that been like? What are the countries and
yeah.
just go into that a little bit.
Yeah, so the reason we even know how many houses we've lived in is because my mom and I sat down one day in our house here in Texas, in America here, but in Texas, and we were just like, how many, like we were trying to count how many times we'd moved into a new house or condo, mostly house, and we started counting, and I think we got to like 21 or something. And then in terms of country, so my dad works in oil and gas, and my mom has always had a more flexible career to where she's been able to work from wherever he happened to be. And we just happened to have a family where whenever he moved, we all moved. And that just was always the case.
The Houston connection a little bit there, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say with the oil and gas, when I start to list out the countries, they will all make sense, I promise. But I was born in Nigeria. I'll like go through it chronologically really quick before we go deeper. So I was born in Nigeria, and then very briefly after we moved to Norway. And then I spent my baby years and my toddler years in Norway. And then the brother right after me was born in Norway. And then we all moved out of Norway. My dad was in Algeria, and then we as a family moved to Nigeria. And then my brother number three was born. And then at some point, when I was around 8 years old, we moved to Houston, Texas. We lived there we didn't, that was one of the shorter ones. Like it was like barely a year. And then we moved back to Nigeria. And then we moved to a different city in Nigeria, which was like a whole other world. We moved to Lagos. And so we had
Mhm.
a long stint in Lagos. We lived in different houses. We went to a lot of different schools and boarding schools and all this stuff there. And then when
That's
I
a
was,
big city, right?
yes,
Like,
yes, pretty
yeah,
major. Lagos is very
yeah.
much New York vibes.
Mhm.
Not in layout. The layout is not New York at all, but the vibe. Lagos is very hustling and bustling, very like social, very network based, and very like party city, very people want to be seen. So it's also where there's also Lagos Fashion Week. So it's all that kind of stuff. But anyway, so like we were in Lagos for a while, and it's a nice if you're a Nigerian, it's a nice place in Nigeria to be. And then by the time I was turning 15, my brothers and I were all going to the British International School in
Mhm.
Lagos. Lagos is broken up. It's mostly talked about in terms of the mainland and the island, right? The island is like it's actually I think there's some colonial stuff there because it's called Victoria Island. And
Yeah.
so yeah. And so well, part of it is called Victoria Island, and then everything else. And so on the island, there's a lot of fancy things. And so on the island, there was the British International School, and my brothers and I went to the British International School. And as I was finishing up, like, because if you're looking at it year to year, the British system, the years before they go to college are shorter than the American high school experience or middle school plus high school experience. And so
Mhm.
there's like a little bit of a gap in between because British people typically do what they call A levels, which is like a couple more senior years of like a specific program before they go into university. And because I knew I was going to an American university, most likely, I went to do IB instead, International Baccalaureate. And my dad was going to be on assignment in Dubai, so I took that as a route to go and do IB in this like very big Harry Potter like school in Dubai. And then I think I only did a year there before the rest of my family moved as well to Dubai. So then we were living in Dubai for quite a while. I spent a lot of my teenage years, my like mischievous years there. And then while we were in Dubai, I got into college and I went out to college. And then somewhere in my sophomore year of college, my family moved to Paris. And then they were there like almost 2 years, and then they moved back to Dubai. And then they were in Dubai for a while. And then in junior year, like or something like that, at some point in my when I was about to finish college, my family was ended up moving to Houston, Texas, all the way from Dubai, and then bought a house, bought cars, and all this stuff. And then my dad, my dad's job was taking him to Dubai yet again. But for the very first time in the history of all our moving, my mom was just like, shout out to you. And so he was flying back, my dad was flying back and forth between Dubai and Houston because they had set a lot of roots in Houston. And like I said before, Nigerians love Houston. So we had a lot of extended family friends, huge network of support for my mom. And she didn't feel like risking that and like moving because she knew that they were going to move him again soon. It turns out they made the right choice because while my dad was flying back and forth between Dubai and Houston, he bought a house out in Dubai. We got to go and visit Dubai again. It was good for that reason. But then they brought him back to Houston, like in 2021 or 2022 or something like that. And so if we had sold all our houses yet again, like sold all the cars and sold everything, and somewhere in there we got a baby brother who's way younger than the rest of us. He was born like I was 13 when he was born. So he's like way younger than the rest of us. And so the tumultuousness of how much we were moving affected him in a different way than it affected us because we did a lot of moving, but the high concentration of moving for us happened in our teenage years, whereas for him, he was 6 and he had already been to like 4 different schools. So I think that's that partly influenced why my parents decided to have my dad be back and forth when they moved him the third time to Dubai. But now everyone's in Houston. That's the home base. And
Mhm.
it's like for the rest of his career trajectory, he will mostly only be in the US. And and now my baby brother, who I mentioned is way younger than the rest of us, he's at home. Brother number 3 is in Dallas. He lives and works there. Brother number 2 recently moved to Austin. He lives and works there. And so I'm the only one that's like non-Texas, which is fine. I like having
Yeah. The
my own.
weird Midwestern sibling. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been good.
Well, time for the real estate stats corner presented by me, Jake Lyons, real estate advisor here in the Chicago area with at Properties and Christie's International and my website, thechicagohomesource.com. In this segment, I am going to share 3 statistics that I think give you at least a pretty good idea of what's going on with the real estate market in the uptown neighborhood of Chicago, because after all, what really is a neighborhood without real estate? So let's go ahead and get into it. The 3 stats I'm going to give you are the median sales price as of the most recent data that I have right now, which right now is March of 2024. So if you're listening to this any later than that, which you probably are, odds are, take that into consideration, is probably a little bit different. But as far as the snapshot right here, the median sales price for 2-bed condos in the uptown neighborhood right now is $345,000. So 50% sold for more, 50% sold for less. That is the median sales price for a 2-bed condo in the uptown neighborhood of Chicago. The median sales price for a house, a actual single family detached house of at least 3 bedrooms, is $1,065,500. And the median rent price for a 2-bed apartment in the Uptown neighborhood is $2,350 per month. So there you have it. That's a little snapshot of what people are willing to what exactly the median, people in the right in the smack dab in the middle are willing to pay to live in the Uptown neighborhood of Chicago. If you have any other questions or want to explore what is on the market right now in Uptown or in any neighborhood in the Chicagoland area for that matter, go ahead and reach out or go to thechicagohomesource.com, which there is going to be a link in the show notes. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for getting into like the chronology of your life story. But that's fascinating, and that's such an interesting cross section of very different places, especially the Dubai kind of throwing a
Yeah.
wrench. And like that's just such a different cultural experience. I would imagine. I've never been. I would love to go, but yeah. So basically, within the years that you would actually remember things. So basically,
Yeah.
you're talking Lagos, Paris, Dubai, Houston, Chicago, obviously, and yeah. So how would you say Chicago compares just in your experience of living in all these different places?
Ironically, I actually do have memories of Norway because my family always jokes that I have like elephant memory, but so do they, like we all do. But I remember Norway. But what I would say from living in all these
Mm,
places is that Chicago, it actually it rises up. It like meets the like worldwide standard of like huge city, major city, lots going on. The main difference is Chicago. When I compare Chicago to all these other places, is there's like an overwhelming Americanness
mm,
to Chicago compared to these other places, right? These other places feel very worldly and international and like just very, very, very specific in the way that they come across. Chicago feels very American. It's very open and friendly and warm and very like consumerist and very status conscious and very big because like for a city that's set up like this, there's a lot of space. Like usually cities that are set up like this don't also manage to have space. And Chicago gets away with having both. I think the other thing that's very American about Chicago, even though Chicago is unique in America in this way, is that Chicago has a lot of aspects. Like it has a lot of things that usually would be a defining trait of a city. So it's laid up like New York, but it also has space. It's a city like this, but it also has a shoreline, big
mhm,
shoreline, many beaches, and it also
mhm,
has have a sports team. It has like all these big stadiums and arenas, and like so it has all the components of what you would want, like a decent sized metropolitan city to have, and it like puts them all in one. And like I just love. I always joke to my friends, like I'm like, oh, you're a big deal when you have like two airports, like two or
yep,
three airports. So stuff
yeah,
like that. Like Chicago is very much like I'm here. I'm a big city. I want you to know that I'm a big city, and all these other places are very like posh, very posh and European. Dubai, for example, is extremely international because
mm,
Dubai and the United Arab Emirates. They're very young regions. Like they used to be sand, like not too long
yep,
ago.
right,
And so with Dubai specifically, they for some reason it seems as if they can't really afford to be as strict on the religious rules and stuff as other what are called emirates
mhm,
because Dubai relies so heavily on international tourism that it feels like they naturally over time had to be a little bit lenient. And only a small proportion of the people I interacted with while I was there and in school and everywhere else were actually Emirati, which is like people who are indigenous to that area. Everyone else was just like not from there. And it's like crazy stark difference. Like I got to boarding school in Dubai and my roommate is half Russian, half Indian. My roommate across the hall is Scottish. Some of my closest friends are Pakistani. I have friends from Mozambique. You go two floors down to the junior floor, and there's a lot of people from Kazakhstan. You have people from Nepal. You have people from Bangladesh. The house masters and like the people who are the boys dorm and boarding school, they're all like British. And then there's Canadians and Americans and Welsh, and
mm,
it's so much, so much going.
yeah.
Yeah,
What a just great enriching experience that must have been to have access to that to learning from that many different types of people and different cultures and things though. Yeah, you made me a little nervous when you described your time in Dubai as your mischievous years,
uh,
and I was just like, "Oh, man, I can't be
no,
getting into too much mischief there now," but
no. Like the reason I say that is because like When I was a teenager, like in America, there was a very like decade-defining TV show known as Gossip Girl. I don't know if you were ever aware of it, but Gossip Girl was this TV show about like it was based in New York, and it was about this Gossip Girl was this blog, and so the voice of Gossip Girl would be narrating the episodes. And the idea of Gossip Girl is that because it was crowdsourced, Gossip Girl was always aware of what everyone was doing, and so Gossip Girl was always like catching people and like posting about people and posting what they were doing and posting evidence because people would text into Gossip Girl or send stuff into Gossip Girl. So it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the kids in Gossip Girl were all like very rich. They lived on the Upper East Side. They came from old money, but like lots of money. And they were, even though they were like late high school kids, they were always in limos and always at events and parties, and they were always getting into things like that. And I don't know if Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds' wife, was her. She had been in stuff before that, but Gossip Girl was her like cult classic, big breakout. And she was very well cast in the role of Sarita Vanderwoodson. That was her character's name, because the charm of Sarita Vanderwoodson was supposed to be like you. She was hated by other girls because she didn't seem like she tried, right? And Blake Lively embodies that. Like Sarita Vanderwoodson just looks so hair tousled and like long blonde hair. She still has money and is chic, but she looks a little more like edgy in her dress style, and she's more experimental. And Blake Lively embodies that. Very like California. I just got out of bed, but I look great. Like I used to just like, joke around that if you're watching the show and you saw scenes of Blake Lively like hailing a cab, like just that alone looked like a Dolce and Gabbana like 15-second ad or something. And so that's the show. That's the kind of show that it was. And people would always talk about it and say it was a very heightened reality because like kids aren't living like this, right? But then I lived in Dubai, right? And I was like, well, I know that exists. I know that world exists because Dubai is just so elevated is the word I keep using, because like even the people in Dubai who are not average, but like the norm, they are very well off, right? So like I remember just like looking around, and for example, like the Porsche SUVs, back at that time, they were very new, right? So those Porsche SUVs were like commonplace. They were like the mom car that people would drive. And so that lets you know what the bell curve looked like in Dubai. And I had lots of, like, everyone I knew was like rich in very different ways. Their parents were either expats who did oil and gas, or you had like kids who were local to Dubai and like were literally in royal families. And like, so it was like that. So when I say mischief, it was just like I was in boarding school. I was in Dubai. And it was just like I had been in boarding school before, but this was the closest to a college kind of module where it was like freedom to like get around and go to parties and like go to my classmates' parties and not really be under my parents' supervision. So
Yeah.
I get like crazy and illegal, but that was where I learned how to decide for my own self how I was gonna toe the line between like having fun and like remaining within my wits. Like so,
Mhm.
that was a
Yeah.
very long
Okay.
answer, but
No,
there,
that's great. No, I loved it. That's good.
yeah.
All right, so in a span of about 2 seconds, we're gonna, travel back halfway across the world, back to
Okay.
the neighborhood of Uptown. But yeah, thank you for all those stories, those are great. What How would you say that living in Uptown specifically, or Chicago in general, has influenced sort of your personal and creative endeavors? Getting into
Yeah.
maybe, like, some of your music and acting, whatever else you wanna explore there.
Yeah. It's been very interesting because when I was moving to Chicago, I knew that I didn't want to move to LA quite yet. That people always it's LA feels like an inevitable thing for people who don't want to be in acting. I wanted to stick with the Chicagos and the Atlantis of the world because it felt like I would be able to pursue acting and all the creative stuff without committing to a full on like LA type experience. I don't want that. Right. At least not yet. And I knew that I was going to be quote unquote elevating in a way. And so I was really glad that within a brief time of moving here, I got signed by an agent because that was such a big deal. Again, I didn't go to school for acting. And so whenever little things would happen that felt real, like getting an agent feels real. Like that's an industry professional who comes to a showcase and sees your work and sees your acting and is like, you know what? Yeah, you're good. And they're saying that from the perspective of someone who's in the industry. So those are the types of experiences that Chicago allowed me to have. Being a few miles away from Second City that produced so many like great comedic actors like Tina Fey's and Amy Poehler's and all those kind of people. The improv scene, the theater scene. And then ever since the strike ended, I've done like 4 auditions already in the space of like a few weeks.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of that comes that I've gotten the opportunity to be I've auditioned for that show called The Shy. I've
Yeah.
auditioned for Chicago PD, Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, all multiple times. I've auditioned for I'm now getting closer to those workshops for like Power and The Bear and those types of shows. And so there's like a there's there's a closeness to that kind of stuff, that kind of pipeline that Chicago affords me. And there is like a big network of creatives that I can also tap into, which is one of my goals for the year, to tap into that more. And then as far as like singing, I know that one of the things that happened with acting is that it like inadvertently forced me to like pull out all my dust off all my old like side skills that I'd forgotten about, like singing and dancing and all this kind of stuff. Because with acting, you want to develop all your other talents as much as possible because it makes you more castable.
Hmm.
The more random shit you can do. And so I was inspired by how quickly my acting took off when I was taking it quote unquote seriously by taking classes and doing the workshops and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, you know what? Let me focus on singing a little bit. And so I went from just singing casually around to like singing and doing like going to the studios and doing like actual covers and stuff like that. So even though I am taking my singing seriously right now, it feels very supplemental to my acting. It feels like I'm an actor who sings instead of a singer who acts. The beauty of a place like Chicago is when I was delving into the world of recording like real like covers, like song covers, I would like look up like recording studios around and like 15 would pop up within like a 2 mile radius, right? And so that's been really, really cool. And then vocal coaches are so many everywhere. My agent, I'm able to be in the same city where my agent has actual offices, and I could go to the events and the galas. And I got to sing at an agency gala recently, which is a very crazy experience because it was like casting directors and actors and directors and producers and TV show runners and stuff. And then my agency, so it's the acting world, but now I'm like
Yeah.
singing.
No pressure. Yeah.
Right. It felt like one of those like Hollywood events, like Variety magazine or something like that, where it's just like a lot of industry people, and now I'm having to sing, and I was like, oh my god. But stuff like that feels like I'm moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Have you engaged with any of the like IO or Second City, like you said, or any of those kinds of things, like the traditional Chicago theater stuff?
I want to do more of that. I think I've been a little spoiled in the sense that the acting coaches that I currently work with already have improv as a piece of the many things that they teach and train on. So I haven't had the need to go and seek out like improv specifically. It would be nice to I do want to check out the second city type places because like it would be nice to go in already having a background because the nerves would be way less and I would be able to go in and there's a sense of like, oh, look what I can do type of thing. And so to be able to do that as a new person in those settings and in those spaces would be fun. I want to do a lot more because the acting that I do is very much TV and film. I'm
Mhm.
not closing the door to theater. I'm open to trying it, but the acting that I do right now is mostly TV and film. And there are some acting classes that are more focused on acting on camera. So I want to look into some of those as well. But so far, I haven't done too much local Chicago training because I already had like my people that I was comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So, yeah, if that's what you're trying to get into, I know I've never acted at all. My wife's done some acting. She's an artist and things like that, so I know enough to know that theater and film just very different experiences with very different kind of skill sets and mindsets and all that kind of stuff. So,
Very much so. Yeah.
yeah. So far in Uptown, what would you say is and I know that we're running overtime a little bit from what you said earlier. Are you okay for like another like 5 minutes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So
What would you say is the most surprising thing, or maybe a misconception that people have had about Uptown that you've been maybe surprised to find is either correct or incorrect?
So I haven't been surprised, but other people would be surprised because I don't know if there's people who realize just how many like modern, nice buildings are up here.
Yeah.
And like I said, I want to keep it that way because you know how people get. This is why we can't have nice things, right? So that has been interesting, like just how many it's like mixed in, right? There's a lot of the old traditional brick buildings with, and then you know all these buildings like the one next to me, which like they look like they used to be banks in another life, and now they've turned into something else. And then
Mhm.
that's like mixed in with very modern glass, steel, and beam buildings with amenities and stuff. So I quite like that. I like that you get the old and the new. Um, and I don't know what when people picture Uptown, I don't know that they don't really picture that. um,
Yeah,
yeah.
makes sense. So what would you say, just bottom line, like just in a summary, why do you think somebody should A, want to move to Chicago, and then B, if they move to Chicago, they made it that far, why do you think they would want to live in Uptown over some other neighborhoods?
Yeah, so I would say you would want to live in Chicago if you were at a pivotal time in your life and you were looking for something new because it'll like jolt your system because there's just so much going on. You will never be in Chicago and be like, "Oh, I need something to do," and there's just nothing. Like that'll never happen ever, ever, ever. And so and the fact that like Chicago is so big. It's so big. Usually cities like have when you look at their quote unquote skyline, it'll be like a cluster of like tall buildings like ahead of you, like down the highway. Chicago is like a whole coast worth of skyline.
Mhm.
And it's
It
so
sure is.
beautiful. Whenever you fly
Yeah.
into Midway from like this side, you just see this the shoreline and the lake and the Ferris wheel, like the Navy Pier and the buildings. It's so beautiful. It's expansive. So many neighborhoods, all with their own individual personalities. There's always something to do. It's a good place for like a eat, pray, love section of your life where you want to like explore new things. And as far as Uptown specifically, I think if you enjoy having very close access to the glitz and glamour of everything that is Chicago, with the ability to just like tuck away when it's time to go home and like go somewhere that still has its own things going on, but is not as crazy as as being smack in the center of the city, then Uptown would be good for you because you get some balance and you're by the lake. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and you even have your close proximity to some really nice famous concert venues and things like that when people come
Exactly.
through, and got
Yeah.
the Green Mill right there is awesome and all
Yeah.
that kinda
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and in terms of accessibility, it's really accessible because like I said, I'm 2 streets from the lake, which also means I'm 2 streets from Lakeshore Drive.
Mhm.
And like once you get on Lakeshore Drive, it's a straight shot into everything else. Like Lakeshore Drive will take you straight into West, it'll take you straight into River North, it'll take you straight to downtown Chicago. So
Yep.
really cool. And it's one of my favorite drives that I've ever taken in any city because like you look to one side and it's the lake, you look to the other side, it's the marina and the city and the buildings. It's a really scenic,
Yeah.
beautiful like drive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think those are all the main questions I have for you at this time. Are there any questions, anything that you would have wanted to bring up that I should have asked concerning Chicago
Oh,
at least?
we had a pretty good conversation. I think there will always be more that could have been said about Chicago because you can
Uh-huh.
talk worse. I think we did a good job like narrowing it a bit and like going in depth a little bit. Um, if shameless plug, like if anyone wants to like check out acting, singing stuff, and reach out to me, my like artist page is just my first like my nickname underscore my shortened first name underscore my last name. So it's AYO underscore AKINOKUN. So that's just at Ayo underscore Akinokun. That's my Instagram handle. And then my personal one is like AYO underscore MAZING. I amazing.
Okay.
So annoying. But here we go.
And those are for Instagram?
Those are for Instagram. Yes.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
put some links in the show notes for those. Anywhere else that people can find you, or is that would that be the best place? Instagram.
That's the best place. And if like for booking, reach out to my email is AYOAKINOKUN at gmail.com. And my agent is Dream Team Talent here in Chicago. So yeah.
Right on. All right. Well, that's awesome. Awesome stuff. Ayo, thank you so much for bringing all your experience and knowledge on all kinds of things, Chicago and the worldly travels and all the other things that you brought to the show. I'm sure the audience will get a ton out of it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Where like how is where what's how is this going to be streamed or seen? Like what's the yeah, what should
Yep.
I
Sure. Yep. So this will be a podcast episode, and then the video part of this will be on YouTube. And then I split the video into segments for Instagram Reels and TikToks and things like that as well.
smart man, smart man.
Yeah.
All right,
Try to
awesome.
get out there just in as many different ways as possible. So building this thing up slowly, but it's starting to get some traction. So
Yeah,
it's
that's good.
the whole idea here is just to try to build a resource for people that are researching different neighborhoods in Chicago, whether they're looking to meet or to learn more about the neighborhood they already live in, or move between neighborhoods, or come in from somewhere else in the world. If
Yeah,
they want to learn about what a neighborhood is like from somebody who actually lives there and has that experience, then that's
yeah.
hopefully is a the valuable resource for them.
Yeah, this would be great because like my friends always like joking around and telling me like, "Oh, you have a podcast, audiobook, radio voice. And so now I can
Yeah.
finally report back and say, hey, I did one.
Yeah, you
Really,
do.
my destiny.
People have told me that my whole life too, so I figured it was about that time, and I listen to so many podcasts, like, I probably listen to 2 or 3 hours of podcasts a day. Sometimes it's a problem how much podcasts I listen to, so I figured it was about time to contribute to the space myself instead of just consuming them all the time.
Yeah, we're both living the dream.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. Alright, well, I'm gonna, hit the old stop record button here, so I'll say one more time, hey, just thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Sure.